Matthew Jokers's macroanalysis presents a fundamental challenge to how literary studies have traditionally been conducted. For generations, the dominant method in literary scholarship has been close reading, the intensive, detailed examination of a small number of texts, usually from the established literary canon. While close reading has produced valuable insights, Jokers argues that it is fundamentally limited as a method for understanding literary history as a whole. The literary record contains tens of thousands of texts, including many forgotten, marginalized, and overlooked works that exist alongside the familiar masterpieces. Relying on just a handful of canonical authors to make claims about entire literary periods or movements is like trying to understand an entire forest by examining only a few trees. The problem with close reading as the primary method for literary history is that it relies on what Jokers calls selective sampling. When a scholar makes claims about the rise of the novel or the characteristics of Victorian literature based on three or four famous writers, they are studying a heavily biased sample. These canonical texts are not necessarily representative of the broader literary landscape. They have been selected and preserved for various reasons, including historical accident, critical preference, and institutional tradition. This sampling creates a circular argument. Scholars study the canon, they find patterns in the canon, and then they claim these patterns represent literary history, while the canon itself was created based on similar patterns of preference. Jokers proposes a new methodological paradigm called macroanalysis. This approach uses computational tools to analyze massive collections of texts, moving beyond human cognitive limits to see patterns and trends across thousands of works. The goal is not to replace close reading, but to complement. Just as macroeconomics emerged to study the behavior of entire economies rather than just individual consumers and businesses, macroanalysis allows literary scholars to study the entire literary ecosystem alongside individual texts. Jokers draws a powerful analogy between literary studies and economics. Traditional literary studies, with its focus on individual texts, resembles microeconomics, which examines the behavior of individual consumers and firms. Both approaches provide valuable insights but cannot capture larger patterns. Just as macroeconomics was born in the 1930s, when economists realized they needed tools to understand the entire economy, Jokers argues that literary studies need macroanalysis to understand the full scope of literary history. The birth of macroeconomics allowed economists to study aggregate phenomena like inflation, unemployment, and economic growth. Similarly, macroanalysis allows literary scholars to study patterns across thousands of texts, the rise and fall of genres, the evolution of stylistic features, the influence of authors across generations, and the changing role of themes over time. These larger patterns cannot be seen through lens of close reading alone. To operationalize macroanalysis, Jokers outlines several key computational methods. The first crucial step is metadata. The contextual information about each text, such as author, publication date, nationality, author gender, and genre. Without accurate metadata, computational analysis cannot situate texts in their historical and cultural context. Flawed or messy metadata can distort findings, making careful curation of bibliographic information a foundational requirement for digital literary history. Once texts are properly contextualized, computational analysis can examine various features. Traditional readers focus on content words, nouns, and plot points. However, Jokers draws on computational stylistics research pioneered by scholars like John Burroughs to show that the most reliable makers of authorial style are actually function words, small, stealthy words like the, of, and, to, and various pronouns and auxiliary verbs, because these words operate below conscious authorial control. They reveal deep stylistic signatures that can track influence, chronology, and evolution across literary history. By measuring the frequencies of these function words across thousands of texts, macroanalysis can create what Jokers calls stylistic fingerprints that connect authors and texts in unexpected ways. Beyond style, macroanalysis addresses the challenge of mapping themes across large text collections using a machine learning technique called topic modeling, specifically latent Dirichlet allocation. Topic modeling treats documents as mixtures of latent topics, where each topic is defined by a probability distribution over words. For example, a topic might include words like ocean, ship, captain, and sailor, suggesting it represents nautical themes. Another topic might include love, heart, passion, and desire, suggesting romantic themes. The power of topic modeling is that it automatically discovers thematic clusters without requiring researchers to predefine categories. This allows algorithmic discovery of patterns that might not be obvious through manual reading. However, Jokers emphasizes that topic modeling does not provide automatic literary interpretations. The computational models generate empirical data points, topic proportions, word clusters, and document groupings that require rigorous human critical engagement. The synergy between machine-driven topic extraction and human interpretive evaluation enables scholars to track how themes evolve, intersect, and cluster across historical periods. Macroanalysis transforms how we conceptualize literary influence and the canon. By converting textual similarities into spatial networks, Jokers demonstrates how texts and authors are linked across generations. These networks expose hidden lines of literary descent, showing that influence is rarely a simple one-to-one transmission. An author might be influenced by multiple predecessors, and the influence might be indirect rather than direct. Examining marginalized or forgotten texts, which Jokers calls orphan works, destabilizes rigid canonical boundaries. The canonical masterpieces appear not as isolated monuments but as high-density nodes within a vast, complex cultural network. Understanding that network helps explain why certain texts became canonical while others were forgotten, and it reveals the rich interconnectedness of literary production. Macroanalysis offers a methodological manifesto for the humanities in the 21st century. By wedding computational rigor with literary history, macroanalysis expands its empirical horizons, challenges canonical biases, bridges the gap between micro-level interpretation and macro-level historical structures. The goal is not to replace the interpretive insights of human readers with algorithmic outputs, but to enrich and expand the evidence based upon which literary history is built.